The sports-themed episode of a non-sports-related television show is indeed a coveted one-episode gimmick. One genre of show that always seems to have a sports-themed episode if it lasts long enough is the sitcom. However, to take this one step further, many sitcoms have a baseball-themed episode, which can vary in terms of quality. So I'll be looking at the top baseball-themed episodes of sitcoms, since it's always fun to see if these characters we watch every week can pick up a sport one time for the sake of a plot that may or may not be referenced again, or for some just meeting professional players involved in the game. Since the baseball or softball episode can vary in terms of quality based on the sitcom, some of these quote-unquote top episodes may not actually be top episodes of the series or even top series as a whole by whatever quality standards you have set for a sitcom. So spoiler alert, this list may start off covering some unremarkable episodes of sitcoms or even just unremarkable sitcoms, but it's really all my opinion and this list is meant for entertainment as well as discussion. Speaking of spoilers, I will recap the plot of these episodes I talk about, so I will be spoiling random episodes of sitcoms. Hopefully you were not coincidentally in the middle of watching these series through a binge watch or something on Netflix. And of course, no sitcoms strictly themed around baseball are allowed on this list. So, enough of me explaining things. Here are the top 10 baseball-themed sitcom episodes. Number 10, Small Wonder with the episode Victor, Victoria. I feel this show needs a brief description before I even talk about the episode. It's a show about a suburban family that has a robot named Vicky, it's an acronym, that looks like an 8-year-old girl who does not know how to blend in with other humans. Also, the world, outside the family, cannot know that she's a robot or something along those lines. How many wacky antics can come from that scenario? Apparently 96 episodes worth. In one of those 96 episodes, the son of the family is on a Little League team, and that team is bad. So he decides to try to get the robot girl to join the team. However, because the coach doesn't let girls on the team, he disguises her as a boy. So after some crazy shenanigans, they have Vicky try out for the team as a guy, and she makes it with her super amazing robot powers, and then is immediately discovered to be a girl. But the coach apparently doesn't care because she's great, so crisis averted, and I guess the 10 minutes of episode taken up worrying about disguising her as a boy was completely useless. Also, here is where the moral comes into the story, where the kid becomes guilty that he'd be using a robot to cheat his team to first place. So he has her fake an injury, making this entire episode plot useless. Like, as soon as she makes the team, the boy feels guilty. He couldn't have felt that a little earlier when his dad gave him a moral chat? Would it have been possible for the writers to get rid of that dress her up as a boy plot that was resolved without conflict and maybe have an episode where, I don't know, she pitches for the team and crazy shenanigans happen that you'd expect from the premise of this show, and then have the boy feel guilty so the moral is still intact? I don't know. This episode wasn't that good to me, but we rarely see a baseball episode of a sitcom with a robot girl, so I guess that's why it's here. Number 9, Futurama with the episode A Leela of Her Own. For those of you unfamiliar with Futurama, the rules of baseball were changed in the future, and the sport was renamed Blernsball. For those of you familiar with Futurama, I just told you something you knew. In this episode, Leela learns she has a knack for hitting the batter with a pitch every time as the pitcher in a game of Blernsball. This was witnessed by the owner of the New York Mets, who saw that an audience found this display of pain very entertaining. As a result, she is recruited in order to attract ticket buyers as a publicity stunt for the Mets, since they are the worst team in the league. So Leela becomes the first female Major League Blernsball player as a pitcher that can only hit batters, which apparently leads to fans cheering for her gimmick. However, when realizing she'll be considered the worst Major League player ever, she tries to get marginally better to prevent that. She gets lessons from the current worst player ever, Hank Aaron the 24th, voiced by the real Hank Aaron, who teaches her not to hit batters, sort of. In the last game of the season, she finally gets a chance to prove that she's not the worst, but in this case, Futurama does not reward the protagonist, and she pitches the game-losing home run, or sort of arbitrary rule that is hard to explain without seeing the episode. Now, this episode is from the pre-cancellation seasons of Futurama, which for the most part were hilarious, and I end up clumping all the episodes together to say each one is terrific by default. However, many fans consider this specific episode to be a weaker one from that period of the show. Overall, I do kind of agree with them, since the game of Blernsball has so many new rules that baseball would never have. It sometimes felt like the writers made up new rules for the sake of plot, and played it off as established rules since we were unaware of the game because it doesn't exist. In addition, as a baseball fan, I've never seen a mass amount of people want a pitcher to hit batters for sheer amusement, which is what I always found wrong with the plot. In the end, though, I can still say this episode is pretty good. It had the same humor Futurama is known for and the same character interactions the show has always had, which makes the episode worth watching to begin with. Plus, Hank Aaron. Number 8. Step by Step with the episode Where Have You Gone, Joe DiMaggio? Step by Step sure was a sitcom that existed. Yup. I mean, it was kind of like an alternate version of Full House, as in it was family friendly and dealt with a large family that had both some relation to each other and no relation to each other. Only Full House had more memorable characters in my opinion, considering I remember those characters' names. It's not really a big deal though, since neither of these shows are the magna opus of sitcoms. They also both had baseball episodes, and I guess Step by Steps was slightly better. It had Harmon Killebrew in it. In this episode, one of the kids goes to a baseball game, excited to meet his favorite player and get his autograph. However, the kid soon learns that the player is surly and won't give the kid an autograph unless he pays $50. So the moral of the story is sometimes the person you look up to is a massive jerk and doesn't care about your feelings. It's enough to make the fake audience do a collective, "Aww." However, because the writers don't want us to go home feeling down for the kid, they add a feel-good factor to the episode where Major League Baseball player and Hall of Famer Harmon Killebrew hears about the incident and offers the kid an autograph, much like something the real Harmon Killebrew would have done. Also, there's some subplot where Suzanne Summers' character is pregnant and hilarity and stuff happens. I don't really know. It's not relevant to the topic of this list. Number 7. King of the Hill with the episode Take Me Out to the Ball Game. In this episode, Hank's workplace of Strickland Propane is part of a softball league that plays other organizations, and Buck, Hank's boss, makes Hank the head coach of the team. He then recruits his wife Peggy, who joins reluctantly, as the pitcher, since family is allowed on the team and she does well in her own softball league. But while the team credits her for great play, Hank does not. This causes them to argue, and as a result, Peggy starts pitching poorly. The team starts to suffer because of it, but then Hank eventually realizes that Peggy wasn't pitching well because he was not appreciating her skill, so then he does appreciate her, and all is well. This was an entertaining episode, but it didn't stand out as much as other King of the Hill episodes in terms of memorable plot. Unlike most sitcoms, King of the Hill plots generally stand out more when the story revolves around propane selling, lawns, and Bobby learning a life lesson. Then again, there was a Bobby subplot present, so there was still that. Number 6. Married with Children with the episode The Unnatural. In this episode, the Bundy softball team that represents the town mall is suffering since husband and father Al Bundy keeps hurting his back during the games. It also doesn't help that the umpire is Al Bundy's worst enemy. The team looks to replace him with a younger, stronger, and more attractive player, Sven, which ultimately happens. In comedic luck, though, Sven gets knocked out during a crucial part of a game. As a result, Al gets a chance to replace him and gets the game-winning home run. Despite how cliché that sounded, Married with Children is a show where the person you root for does not usually win in the end. It's also a show where everyone's kind of a horrible person and the best person in an episode is usually just the least disliked one. That being said, it was good to see a guy down on his luck come through in the end. However, I do have to note that in an earlier episode, How to Spell Revenge, part of the plot was Al Bundy trying to get his wife Peg kicked off the team because she was horrible. So it seems now Peg is alright and Al is the terrible one? I mean, what's continuity even? Honestly, these are just one episode plots and it's nothing to get worked up about since it rarely affects plots in the future. Number 5. South Park with the episode The Losing Edge. As we've seen with South Park in the past, this was an unconventional look at a common television and movie trope. The kids of South Park are basically forced to play in a Little League baseball team, despite the fact they find baseball incredibly boring. To find a way out of having to play the game all summer, they try to lose their next game in the playoffs, which doesn't work since the kids on the opposing team feel the exact same way. So both teams are competing to be the worst in order to lose and not have to spend any more of their summer playing baseball. It gets down to a point where the pitching team is arguing that a strike was a ball. The team is so bad at losing that eventually the kids win against every team in the playoffs. Just when they think they're done though, they learn that the winner moves on to the statewide championship, and then the winner of that moves on to the national championship games, potentially meaning they could play the game all summer. And of course the Denver team that they're playing against in the statewides do not want to win either. Overall, this was a really good twist on the classic "we gotta win" team cliche. Really, this episode was funny on its own, so me analyzing it seriously would defeat the purpose of its satire, so I'll just leave it here. Number 4. Arrested Development with the episode Switch Hitter. Unlike the other sitcoms on this list, Arrested Development is a bit different. The plot in each episode affects future episodes and is affected by previous episodes. So to go into this specific episode, I would need to go into a lot of the plot that has gone on up until this Season 2 episode. So because of that, I won't be covering this episode that much. I will say that it uses the format of a company versus company softball game that we've seen before, but it is still done in a unique way as we've seen with a lot of Arrested Development humor. It's funny how I'm fine with spoiling every other episode I've spoken about in this video up until now, but when I get to Arrested Development, I'm basically like, whoa, watch it on your own, I'm not spoiling that. Number 3. Dennis the Menace with the episode Dennis and the Pee-wee League. In this episode, we learn that the neighbor Dennis loves to terrorize, Mr. Wilson, was a former baseball player, which is only noted in this episode and never brought up again to my knowledge. Interesting how that works out. Anyway, they basically need a new commissioner for the Pee-wee Baseball League that Dennis and his friends are in, so Dennis convinces the council of parents to make it Mr. Wilson based on his baseball past. Fast forward to the second half of the episode where Dennis's dad gets sick and cannot coach the team, and Mr. Wilson becomes Dennis's team's coach for that episode, mostly because he wants to beat the arrogant neighbors team. To have an amazing comeback in the last inning, Mr. Wilson has the kids channel their anger, which works in both leading to the team's victory and a feel-good ending. And like every good sore loser sports fan, the arrogant neighbor accuses Mr. Wilson of cheating with absolutely no platform other than that he was annoyed that Mr. Wilson's team won. Overall, this episode was pretty timeless. The humor still felt relevant for the most part, and Mr. Wilson's facial expressions when encouraging the team were certainly a joy to look at. Not only that, but you really wanted Mr. Wilson to win at the end because his motivation felt real based on how much the arrogant neighbor was antagonizing him throughout the episode. Good job, Dennis the Menace, you earned your thumbs up from me. Number 2. The Simpsons with the episode Homer at the Bat. This was one of the defining episodes of The Simpsons since it was in the 3rd season when the show wasn't quite as established as it would be in a few years, and the episode demonstrated that The Simpsons could have about 9 guest stars without it feeling like a cluttered mess or a showcase of saying, hey, look at all the celebrities we got to come on the show. In addition, this would be the first time The Simpsons dominated their time slot in prime time since they beat out both The Cosby Show and the Winter Olympics in terms of viewership. The former was their main sitcom competition that always beat out The Simpsons in viewers, and the latter is the Olympics, which is kind of a big deal. In the episode, the power plant softball team experiences much success, mainly thanks to Homer surprisingly. As a result, Mr. Burns makes a $1 million bet that his team will win the last softball game against the rivals in Shelbyville. But to ensure the unethical victory, he hires 9 all-star baseball players to join the power plant, making them eligible for the team. He got guys like Ken Griffey Jr., Darryl Strawberry, and Roger Clemens, all 9 players being voiced by themselves. However, everyone except for Darryl Strawberry becomes ineligible to play due to multiple factors right before the game. I mean, Don Manley could have played if he just shaved those sideburns. Homer is excluded because Strawberry and him play the same position, benching Homer. In comedic luck though, with the game tied in the bottom of the 9th and 2 outs, Homer gets a chance to bat since the pitcher is left-handed and Homer is right-handed. So Homer gets the game-winning run to home plate by getting hit by the pitch and being knocked unconscious. So while we get a feel-good ending, the Simpsons writers find a way to twist it in a clever way without making the story mean-spirited and keeping to true positive emotions. And that's why this episode is one of the best. But not the best, kind of. It was really hard to choose between this episode and my number 1 entry on this list, which is coming up right now. Seinfeld. It's always had some baseball themes present in the show, such as Jerry and George playing softball or George working for the New York Yankees. But there was one episode that had a baseball theme that is both one of my favorites and a fan favorite as well. It's not only a great baseball-themed sitcom episode, but it is a great Seinfeld episode, in fact one of the best. Number 1 is The Boyfriend. In this episode, Jerry meets Mets legend Keith Hernandez and basically becomes friends with him. Something Jerry never would have expected since Keith is one of his favorite baseball players and he puts him on a high pedestal. After spending some time with Keith, Jerry learns that Keith likes Elaine and he eventually goes on a date with Elaine. However, in order to do that, he has to skip meeting with Jerry, straining their friendship. The last straw is broken when Keith wants Jerry to help him move into his new apartment, ending any chances of us seeing Keith Hernandez as a regular character on Seinfeld. This was just a summary of the main plot, but there's a lot going on during all of this. It's Seinfeld, so there's always two plots going on at once. Some other notes are Newman and Kramer have a beef with Keith Hernandez because he allegedly spit on them after a Met game when they were heckling him, all shown in reference to the movie JFK with the theory of the second spitter. There's also a good amount of references to Keith's career and the 1986 Mets. We even learn that Keith Hernandez literally thinks the sentence, "I'm Keith Hernandez," which answers Elaine's own thought because it's a joke, but I like to imagine they just sometimes thinks, "I'm Keith Hernandez," on his own without anything provoking it. Overall, this episode hits the humor nail on the head and can even teach us a lesson that any athlete can be exactly like us or someone we know and is not immune to ditching us for someone else. And to this day, real-life Keith Hernandez and real-life Jerry Seinfeld are still friends, or at least are friendly enough when I see them on TV. So with that being said, are there any other baseball-themed episodes of sitcoms I didn't include? Are there any other baseball-themed episodes of any show that I should know about? Let me know! Thank you all for watching, and as always, I will see you in the next video.